Super Progressive, what is good? We have another very special episode of the Super Progressive podcast today because once again, we are joined by Sasha. And in this interview, we are talking all about Global Underground 009 San Francisco. Now, this is one of the most legendary mix compilations of all time. And as you probably have all heard, Sasha has once again teamed up with Amplifyd to present phase 2 of the Sasha collection auction, where he is auctioning off the specific acetates and the specific vinyl that he used to make this mix compilation happen. The actual acetates and the actual vinyl he used to mix this legendary mix album. So I have to say a huge thank you to Amplifyd for helping me get this interview set up. A huge thank you to Sasha for giving so much of his time to us and sharing so many stories about this legendary mix compilation. And I just also want to thank all of you for your relentless passion for this music. I made this for you, and I hope you all enjoy it. Let's go. Global Underground 009 in San Francisco. It's one of the most beloved, not only Global Undergrounds, but mixed compilations of all time. And my first question for you is, how was San Francisco chosen as the location? And what can you tell us about the club 1015 Folsom and the Spun Day party?
Uh, Basically, back then, I think San Francisco was my favorite place to play in the States. You know, the scene there, I absolutely adored. The guys running Spunday was such an amazing crew. Geeve, Kelly, Henry, those guys, this, they just, we just had such a I just had such a strong connection with the crowd in San Francisco back then. I always said that if I ever moved to America, that's where I'd want to live. But when it came around to it, I ended up in Florida and New York. But yeah, the scene back then, and especially at Spun Day. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why I had a strong connection with San Francisco. I mean, I played the opening night of Sound Factory when that opened. Dave Dean opened Sound Factory in this kind of giant car park building. And I was there for the first night of that and the first weekend of that. Um, yeah, I always loved the energy of the San Francisco crowd, the energy of the city. It's changed a lot since then. But I still have a soft spot in my heart for that. I'm playing there again in November. I'm looking forward to it. I always have great gigs there, but there was something special about Spunday and the Spunday crew and 1015 Folsom. It had a magical vibe to it.
The city also from listening to your mix compilations, they also had some great producers in
Yeah.
that city as well. And I think of the Hard Kiss brothers with
Yeah,
Delusions of
okay.
Grandeur, Rain Cry on
Yeah, yeah, of
Northern Exposure.
course. Yeah,
Uh,
great guys, great crew. Yeah, San Francisco always had it moved to its own beat. It always had its own kind of flavor and its own sound, and it had this kind of uh, what's the word? I don't know. You could listen to a record from San Francisco and know straight away it was from there, you know?
one of, I think it's cool because so much of your history in the United States, people always refer to Twilo and then Delta Heavy. But that history of you in the United States is so interesting to me. And I just want to talk about that for a little bit because this mixed compilation comes out in November of 1998. Knowing that your Twilo residency started in 1996, that's probably got to be around the peak of the time of that residency and a lot of the tracks found on this mix compilation. Would you say it's accurate to say that that represented the sound of your Twilo residency as at the time as well?
Yeah, sure. On some levels, it was definitely I think someone had already done New York.
Yeah, Paul.
Right, right. Paul had already done New York. San Francisco always on my list of if I was going to do a global underground based in the States, I think San Francisco would have been top of the list. It was so integral to part of my kind of journey in becoming getting to that point where we could hold a residency at Twilo wouldn't have happened without these phenomenal nights that I had in San Francisco and Florida and Denver and Atlanta and all these kind of out of the way places. Built up to us getting to New York and suddenly being taken seriously.
Yeah, definitely. And before we get into the individual tracks of San Francisco, one question that I really want to ask you is when it comes to the history of electronic music in the United States, I think there's so much coverage on New York, Chicago, and Detroit, obviously because of house and techno's origins in those cities.
Yeah,
But the kind of underground, quote unquote, progressive sound, from what I've learned, really started in Florida with clubs like Oz and Simons,
yeah,
where I think that was, your first trip ever or your first time ever gigging in the United States was in Florida.
yeah.
Can you kind of talk about what was so special about that early northern Florida scene in Orlando, in Gainesville with Oz and Simons?
I mean, I'd never had a gig in the States before, and obviously we all this music that we've been playing for years and obsessively collecting for years that came from the States. Legendary names that would come over from America to the UK. Um, you know, yeah, I got invited to come and play the Beecham Theatre, which was Oz by Kimball and Stay Space. They came to a gig I was doing in London, and they're like, "We really want you to. We love your music. We really want you to come and play in America." And it was just like at this point, it was a little bit mind blowing. I was used to like touring, doing weekends around the UK. I'd do the odd little show in Europe, but not that much. I think I'd gone to Australia once, but at that point, but going to America was like mind blowing. And then getting to America and getting to this club and realizing that, Kimball had been championing my music there, and the crowd were completely locked into what I was doing, and walking into like a hero's reception there was just incredible. Well, Kimball had been championing this sound of ours that we've been building and my remixes and stuff like that. And to suddenly get to somewhere thousands of miles away from home and realize you've got another home was amazing. And it was a very late night scene as well. It was very quirky, like the club would be open for normal hours until 2 a.m., then they'd clean out and then they'd reopen at 3 a.m. And we'd play till 7 or 8 in the morning. It was a bit of a new experience. I was quite at that point in the UK, there weren't many kind of all night licenses and all that sort of thing. So the same with Simon. Simon's, you'd go there for hours and get lost in that place. So that kind of late night scene was a real eye opener. Always coming out of the club in the morning and the sun's blazing, and it was a fantastic experience for a very young DJ, Sasha.
It's awesome. And the last thing I'll say on that is, you know, I think it's within 2 weeks of each other. Obviously, you're in Sasha's Renaissance. The Mix collection comes out 2 weeks later, in the same 2 week period. Kimball releases his legendary mix compilation, United DJs of America Volume 1,
Right.
showcasing a night at Oz. It's just cool how not only were you guys playing the same music, but literally to the same weeks that these pioneering mix compilations were released. It's really awesome. Let's fast forward now to this specific mix compilation, GU009 San Francisco. One of the enduring images of this mix compilation is Dean Belcher's iconic photograph of the clubber lighting a cigarette for you in almost what looks like a twisted like club remake of what Michelangelo painted on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. But we've heard Dean's side of the story, but I really want to, in your words, like, what was that an authentic moment? Was it fabricated? But it really does
Oh,
showcase
it's
what's
it's
so
certainly
special about this, like the
it's
connection between the club and the DJ.
yeah, it certainly wasn't fabricated. I mean, that moment kind of captures the feeling in the room where you're at one with the clubbers and you know, yeah, that's a great photo. And uh, yeah, I've been asked questions about that so many times. Like, do you know anyone in this picture? And I'm like, I don't. I smoked back then when I DJ'd, so I quite often reach over and get a light. There was nothing out of the ordinary really in that picture, but the way he captured the moment is well, that's the sign of a truly great photographer, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, Dean's awesome. Okay, now let's talk about the individual CD1 and CD2 mixes and the tracks that are on them. So
Yeah, it's
as
interesting. It's interesting you talk about Twilo because to me, looking at the track list, the second CD does feel like our Twilo sound back then, but the first CD definitely feels more like what I would play at a club like 1015.
Well, it's cool you say that because when I listen to them, and it's kind of characteristics of the global undergrounds in general, where the CD1 feels like potentially a more uh, create, not like more creative than the CD2, but more outside the box and more unique to the individual DJ, where CD2 is that authentic anthemic club pumping sound. But CD1 to me really sounds outside the box. And for clubbers all these years later, it still has a freshness to it. But I'm very curious about your approaches to CD1 and CD2. Let's start with CD1, that Street Bums not even described as an acapella intro, but that kind of natural sounds intro. How'd you decide to kick it off with that?
Well, I was looking for an intro track, and the guys from Global Underground, they used to love going around and recording random stuff. And I don't think anyone had ever used anything before. But I'd said to them I'd like to embed something from the city in the mix, and I wasn't sure how I was actually going to do that. But yeah, they came back with this incredible kind of caught on the caught on the street moment. Um, and as soon as I heard it, I'm like, okay, that's going straight in. It was perfect.
There's a track on the CD1 that is familiar to clubbers all around the world, and it's many different iterations, and that is Morgan King's "I'm Free," and
Yeah,
it's my all-time favorite transition when on in Northern Exposure, where you go from I think I'm free into kites, but on
yeah.
this one you choose to include the William Orbit remix. And now William Orbit, as someone learning about the history of this music, and David and I were talking about this, he's kind of one of those guys that transcends this specific sound transcends electronic music. He shows up everywhere. He's one of these legendary producers of all kinds of music. Also, Water from a Vine Leaf on Northern Exposure. But why is he a producer you continually have confidence in going back to when it comes to creating these mix compilations?
I mean, he to me is somebody who kind of rewrote the rules on how to create sound and create atmosphere in electronic music. I mean, I used to listen to his albums constantly whenever I was producing, and I'd be constantly playing sounds off his albums to people saying how do I create this sound, and how does he get this sound? It just used to blow my mind what he used to do. And eventually meeting him down the line, he used to explain to me how he used to create his sound. And I used to work off an MPC 3000, and I would basically everything I was working on would be coming out of the stereo outputs of this Akai MPC 3000, and it would sound great. And then an engineer would come into the room and he would split everything up across a desk and it would sound like shit. And then he would spend the next 2 days trying to get it to sound good again. As and that always just used to I always used to confuse me that. And then when I spoke to William Orbit and he's like, oh no, there's something very special that happens with the stereo output of those Akai machines. So he used to use Akai samplers, and then he would have compressors on the stereo bus, stereo output of the Akai samplers, and then he would just ram everything through that stereo. He would never split things up, and it creates this glued together sound, which I was always striving to get to, and I would get close to it with my MPC, but then an engineer would come in and go, no, that's not how you do it. And it wasn't until kind of years later that I'm like, damn it, I was right actually back then. um, so Yeah, he's an inspirational character. His music's always blown my mind, and obviously the Morgan King thing came out on my record label at the time, Accession. You know, he delivered this mix that was just absolutely out of this world. It was nothing like what I was expecting to get from him. I was expecting another kind of slowed down, kind of trippy breakbeaty kind of thing that a lot of his albums were like, and then he sent through this absolute monster of a record with some sounds in it that I just, I spent a couple of years trying to work out how he'd made half the sounds in that record. And yeah, it's an absolute classic.
That is awesome. On a more on a more serious tone, CD1 ends with Libra presents Taylor Anomaly calling your name, the Albion mix. And there was just a few weeks ago, like a very emotional outpouring of support and remembrance for Taylor after
Yeah,
his after his passing. And
yeah,
you had a very poignant moment at Balance Croatia where you
yeah,
played out this track. But what
yeah.
can you say about this track and Taylor as a producer? Because it seemed like the entire community behind our music. It was a collective loss for everyone who spent kind of made memories of their lives to his track.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor and I became very close. You know, when he started always around about the same time as I started playing 10:15 Folsom. I would go and do Thursday nights down at his club in Orange County. And, we became very close over the years. He always used to come and visit me in the UK. And yeah, yeah, I really wish that he'd pursued his production career a little further than he did. I think he was one of those producers that was very nervous about, how things would be judged, and he was very worried about how his music would be rated. And I think I've seen this happen with a lot of producers who I have absolute respect for, but they get terrified to put music out because I don't know, for whatever reason they think things aren't good enough, or I think that's held back a lot of producers over the years. Sometimes you just got to put stuff out and just keep going, and not everything you put out is going to be a masterpiece. But this song is a beautiful piece of music that he made with BT. And yeah, I wished he'd taken his production career a little more seriously. But what he left behind is still so beautiful, and like you said, it's so poignant now.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on to CD2, which you said was more kind of representative of what was going on at your residency at Twilo and that
Yeah, for
peak time
sure.
club sound. Um, you may have to help me with the pronunciation of this. I know it as Hale Bopp, but the artist Der Dritte Raum. This
Yeah,
track
yeah,
is is one of your, people absolutely love this mix and they always point to this track as a standout track. What I think is cool is that this track is loved by multiple generations because Maceo Plex, all these years later, came out with another amazing remix, honestly, of a classic that was the highlight of his Boiler Room set, which reached an entire new generation of
right.
clubbers. But what can you say about the original mix and why clubbers continue to point back to that one as one of the standout highlights from this mix?
I mean, it just captured a sound that was just, I mean, it really just was us, the sound that we were playing right then. It was like this kind of fast pulsating kind of melodic. I mean, it just had it had everything that a progressive anthem would need, but it had this uniqueness to it, in the melodies and in the way it was produced and the sequencing, that was just really, those guys were really on it in the studio. You could tell those guys really knew their way around the studio. He had this beautiful, clean sound to it. And the melodies, I think, like you said, have sort of transcended a couple of generations, really, because you can see people are constantly doing new versions of this, and it still stands up.
Yeah, it's that cosmic aspect to it, which
Yeah,
hits me right away. It's like that's what it just stays with you even after the first time you hear it.
yeah, yeah. It definitely has a kind of cosmic, otherworldly sound to it.
You move into a Oliver Lieb remix of Illuminatus Hope, and now Oliver Lieb is a someone who's featured twice on this mix because he also has the paragliders. He's paragliders. He also has paragliders. Change Me. He to me, when I go back and listen to this music, it reminds me how I've learned about how the barriers between genres weren't so thick and defined back when this album came out as they are now, where people are so quick to say that track is of this genre, that's a trance track, that's a progressive track. He seems to have blended this progressive trance
Well,
sound together
yeah.
really
Again,
impressively.
again, he was another producer who I used to obsess over his recordings and try and work out how he made sounds and where he was getting this sound. And yeah, he was an absolute legendary performer, producer for myself and for John and for that whole sort of 90s progressive sound on the trancier side. I think he was the absolute don back then. It's kind of weird though, because I don't think he got the recognition that he deserves in his homeland in Germany, because I guess he wasn't maybe techno enough. Um, but he did really well outside of Germany, and like in the UK and in the States, we used to obsess over his music. And yeah, he's one of the greatest producers of that era for sure.
Now I'm going to kind of jump ahead to the final act of CD2, which when people talk about their all-time favorite sequences of tracks in mixed compilations, this is often brought up, which is Breeder's The Chain, into Paragliders Change Me, into back to Breeder with Twilo Thunder, into Jack Prongo moving through your system. Simon Noble, Rowan Blades, Breeder. Uh, just such a freaking energetic, turned up but clean and sophisticated sound with both The Chain and Twilo Thunder. What can you say about those two productions and the affinity that clubbers have for those two tracks?
I mean, what happened I remember what happened at our first gig at Twilo's. John and I went in and we were playing a lot of music we'd been playing around the States. We've been on tour a lot, been playing a lot of shows, and we went into that room and we very quickly realized, even after the first show, there were certain tracks that we were playing that just didn't fit that room. Things that were too chaotic and too busy, just didn't sound great in that room, and things that were really stripped back and minimal. And that kind of darker sort of progressive sound that was just very stripped back and took a long time to sort of evolve. That stuff we realized just sounded fucking incredible on that Twilo sound system. So we very quickly kind of tailored our sound to having this more stripped back feel. And our success at Twilo became such a kind of talking point. you know People were flying over from the UK. Producers were flying in from the UK every month. Back then flights were so cheap. It was like 100. You could get a ticket on Virgin for like 150 quid. People were coming out for the just to go to Twilo for one night in a hotel and then back to the UK the next day. I'd see some of the same faces on that Virgin flight that I took every month from the UK. I'd see some of the same people on that flight, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're coming to Twilo." So people would come to Twilo to experience this sound that we were developing in this room, and it immediately we started getting sent music back from producers that had been influenced by what was going on at Twilo. Um, and yeah, that kind of stripped back, high energy, but stripped back and space in the mixes, those kind of things. Just we started getting sent a lot of that stuff, and it kind of, I think the sound system itself tailored it helped us. I think it pushed the sound forward because we tailored our sets to that sound system, and then obviously people started making music for our sets that worked alongside all that other music. So it was really interesting to see that a sound system itself could kind of shape the way music was going to change. And I think that's what happened with not just with our sound, progressive house, but with house music and with all, the other DJs that were playing there. I mean, Junior Vasquez's music, and that sounded incredible on that system. And he got so many UK house producers making music specifically for him as well. It was, I think, one of the most iconic, influential sound systems of all time, really.
Yeah, and I'm curious about the logistics of your monthly trips to the United States. Would you pair I forget if it was the first Friday of the month or the last Friday of the month that your Twilo
No,
residency was
last, it was last
last
Friday.
Friday?
Yeah,
Would
yeah.
you pair it with another date in America so you could hit two cities at once?
Yeah, usually I'd have to go somewhere on the Saturday. I was usually not in great shape, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'd usually try and fly in on the Thursday, but quite a lot I'd have to fly in on the Friday itself. I can't do that anymore, but yeah, quite a lot I'd fly in on the Friday. You'd arrive in New York, you're already 5 hours into the wrong time zone, and then get some sleep in the hotel, and then go to the gig, and then yeah, so coming out of the club at 8 in the morning, it's kind of 1 in the afternoon in the UK. So yeah, it was a marathon for sure.
The last producer I want to touch on is Quivver, because
Yeah,
even though his name Quivver or John Graham is not included in the track list, he is Stoneproof Quiver Space Mix, and he
right,
also at the time was part of Tilt with Mick
right,
Park and
right.
Wilson. I forget Wilson's first name.
Nick
I
Wilson.
apologize. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you,
Yeah,
David. You end the mix on Tilt's Resurrection mix of I Dream.
yeah.
Monster track, but how did you find that track to be a fitting end to everything that preceded it on the mix?
Um, I mean, it's a tricky question how I come around with the. I think what happens with a lot of these mixed compilations is I come up with a transition, like you said, the breeder transition into Jacques Prongo. That was maybe something I was even playing out live at the time. I tested it out live, and I knew those things just worked together seamlessly. Um, and then again, I think maybe the Tom Craft into the tilt thing was something I was playing out. Definitely, there were certain sections on here that I'd actually played out. The Classified Project Medway, Slick Mix, Sneaky Alien stuff. I definitely played those things out before. I think Morgan King into Libra I'd played out. So this is before the days where anything you play out suddenly gets on the internet and everyone's seen it all before. I was in the privileged position back then of being able to test out little sections. And I knew before I went to the studio to record this that I had probably 70% of it already in my head of where things were going to fit. And then the challenge when you get into the studio to do the last section is, it's finding the intro, it's finding maybe the last track, or it's finding a way of connecting. You might have two or three sections you've done, but there's gaps in between, and finding ways of connecting those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And before I kind of hand it over to David for more acetate centric questions, he came to me with like a really fun question to end this part of the interview on, which is, okay, Global Underground, there is this like decades long debate amongst clubbers which mix they prefer, San
Right.
Francisco or I'm going to say Ibiza because I got absolutely massacred in the comments for keep on calling it Ibiza, but Ibiza or San Francisco. I'm wondering if you have a preference between the two mix, or even maybe even more insightful, what you think makes the two mixes different from one another.
I mean, they both capture a really unique moment in my career where I was kind of on fire, and I was having, I think this San Francisco CD really captures a period of time. The first one that reflects on my kind of history with San Francisco, and the second one was reflecting what was going on at Twilo at the time. And Ibiza, the Ibiza CD, at the time that my space kind of residencies was just such an important thing. It's impossible to pick. It's like, which is your favorite kid? You know, they're both my babies, and I love them both dearly.
Yeah, that's awesome. We love them both too. David, let's get technical on the acetate front because a lot of these are what's included in the a lot of these are the most interesting parts of the auction with Amplifyd.
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, so what you were saying earlier about like the Twilo sound system and how you had artists kind of actually start to make music specific to that
Right,
system, also for your sets, you and John. So I mean, this is I think one of the most interesting items in the whole collection. This is the Twilo. It's got Twilo Thunder and the chain here from
right,
Breeder.
right.
And but one thing specifically I've noticed with like Breeder is one, like Slacker was another producer where I saw
Yeah,
you see it like they have a lot of acetates out there with like different cuts
Yeah.
of some of these tracks, and it seems like they were like in the studio, and then they would immediately send it out to either you or John or these other DJs. So I would love to hear, you know,
Yeah, I
um,
mean that was the
yeah.
process. I would get that, because I was living in London at the time. I had my little studio there, so I would get DATs constantly couriered around. A guy turns up on a motorbike, he gives me an envelope, it's got a DAT in it, and I would collect those DATs during the week, and then on Thursday I'd call up the whichever mastering it house it was. It became 7/7, mainly towards the end, but yeah, I would send over my own bike to the mastering studio with like, I don't know, 10, 15 DATs in there. And then Friday I'd be heading up north to pick up to do some shows in the UK, and I'd basically drive past the mastering station in Chiswick and pick up all my fresh bag of acetates for the weekend. Or if I'm heading to the airport, for example, if I'm going on tour for a couple of weeks or heading to New York, that's basically how it worked. I mean, the record labels themselves would also cut acetates and just bike those over as well. So yeah, it was yeah, but it was always really nice to get sent over a DAT from one of your producers that you respected so much. The Slacker guys lived just around the corner from me, so they were always sending things over to me.
Yeah. And would you would give them feedback on how the versions went when you played them out, and then they would tweak it? Is that how it would kind of work?
I don't know. So a lot of the times they'd come to the shows, so they'd hear them out, or I'd be playing stuff on Radio One or things like that. I mean, they would get feedback that way. Um, there wasn't like this open way. There wasn't this open communication that we have now with WhatsApp and social media. It was very, very early days of mobile phones, and so yeah, there wasn't such an open communication there. But a lot of these guys that were producing this music that we love were coming to the shows, so they would hear it out, and yeah, then they might go back and tweak something.
Mhm. Awesome. There was a video I think Will you posted a while back from the Delta Heavy tour where you're on video and you're showing how you have like a box with like you must have had like 30 of these or something. You were talking
Yeah,
about how you had them all made, and well, one I think like for people who don't know, these things are like super heavy when
yeah, yeah.
especially when you get a bunch of them. So were you literally carrying these around the world?
Yeah, those record boxes were really heavy towards the end. I mean, like, towards the end of my vinyl days, half of my music was acetate. So, yeah, the record boxes got very, very heavy. But yeah, yeah, but it's the equivalent now of getting sent a track by a producer friend of yours on a Friday evening on a Dropbox link, and then you've been able to play it out and put it on your stick and being able to play it out that night. We all take that for granted now, how easy that is, but back then it just wasn't like that. So, a lot of the time I'd get sent these tracks even before the record label had heard them, you know. And, the first white label might be weeks, even months away. And then from white label to release date sometimes took a long time as well. So, that was the reason why it was so important and so special was that I knew I had this music maybe for 6 months, a year, that I was one of the only few that had this piece of music. So it really made my sets very unique back then. So I owe a lot to that process. It made my sets very, very special.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing I've noticed too, is I think kind of what you're saying about how you didn't have WhatsApp and all that. You would have records with like handwritten kind of notes on them on the sleeve from the producer, kind
Right.
of, you know, telling you like, hey, this is our latest mix. Let us know what you think. A lot of times they put their phone number on there.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, no, super cool.
Very, very old school.
I have one last acetate question here. Just another thing I've noticed on some acetate. So this has wavy gravy on here,
Okay.
but a lot of times, like on the back of some of these acetates, I mean, either they'll be totally blank,
Yeah.
or in a case like this, they might actually have some grooves on it, but there's no label. And I've seen it both ways where
Have
the
you tried
B
playing it?
not yet, but I can tell you from some other ones. Like I've even seen where they'll like they'll scratch out
Yeah, no,
one
I've seen the
side.
way where they've scratched it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you can just speak a little to that, like, why might one side be scratched out or not labeled? Um, yeah, I'm not sure if you have any insight on that.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think maybe I mean, I don't know about that one in particular, but I think sometimes the cutting process itself kind of glitches out,
Hmm.
so they use the other side to recut it, and then that side works. I mean, that can be my only explanation of that. I mean, um, they would never forget to label something that I'd actually asked them to cut. So I can only think that maybe the cut on the B side of the Wavy Gravy is a messed up one, or if I'm doing loads of acetates and they do mess up, what they might have one that they messed up. I'm not sure actually. That
Yeah.
is a good question. I don't really have the answer to that.
Yeah.
The ones where it's scratched out, I think is where they've messed up the cut, and it's
Mhm.
something's happened with the machinery while they're cutting that particular. But that one in particular, I don't know. We'd have to play it and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think people should understand that like these records they have to be that they're cut in like a real time process.
Yeah,
So
it's
to
a
be
one-off.
playing,
Yeah, it's a one-off thing.
yeah,
It's a machine that cuts the vinyl, cuts the groove into the acetate, and then when it's done, it's done.
yeah, cool. Yeah, that was all I had.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much, Sasha, for kind of sharing the stories behind these tracks that have formed the soundtrack to so many people's lives. Like, I can't explain how much positive feedback we got about the Ibiza interview that we did, and that these stories just kind of like just give new life and perspective to these mixes that people have been listening all their lives. So it's really awesome. And just want to thank you for your time. Good luck with the auction. And I just know that it's making a lot of people really, really happy to feel like they can own a piece of this history. And I'm sure it must be fulfilling for you to see how
It's
passionate
really, it's
people are
really
about
fascinating
this.
to me. Music has become so. People have just got so used to having attaching no value to music. People are just so. I think Noel Gallagher was talking about it. People are more happy to spend 20 euros on some expensive coffee at some stupid coffee shop in New York or London than they would be to spend that on a piece of music that they might own for their whole life. And it's such an incredible point. What this auction has given me is this such a wonderful feeling of realizing how valuable this music is to people. It's really, I really was at a point a few years back where I was going to get rid of the whole collection for very little money, and I just wanted to be, I didn't know what to do with it. It was collecting dust, and I felt like it didn't have any value, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And to suddenly realize how cherished this music is by these people, and to see it go the way it did in the first auction has been absolutely mind-blowing, heartwarming, and it's really made me feel like I'm doing the right thing with these auctions.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, thank you for letting us be a small part of it. And yeah, we will see you soon. I know you'll see David in Denver. I'm very jealous I can't be joining you, but I will see you at ADE for the
Okay,
Lost and Found gig. Should be awesome.
great. I'll see you there.
See ya.
Yeah,
Bye.
awesome. Thanks,
Bye.
Sasha.
Bye.